So this is my first time being in Amsterdam in this time of year, and like I didn't realize it got sunny and warm here. Like it's beautiful right now. I'm usually here for FITC, which is in the winter, so it's freezing and gray. So yeah, really happy to be here. So again, I just mentioned what I'm going to be talking about, all about Flash gaming, but a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, like the new features we're doing, they have just as much use for other areas of Flash work as well, and we'll see that as we get into it. So if you want to get a hold of me, like I usually have this big slide with like email, you know, blah, 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 blah. The reality is Twitter is usually the best place to get a hold of me nowadays. It's just at Lee Brimelow, so if you have questions afterwards, I'm going to be around for the rest of the day as well, so feel free to ask me questions or you can hit me up on Twitter. So the one thing I want to point out that we recently did was we built this gaming microsite, and the purpose of this was to create something that didn't look like Adobe.com. You know, it was its own site, and it just highlighted why you should use Flash for games when you're building games for web and for mobile. And most importantly, it has a showcase of the top games that are being built today in Flash. And because you'd be surprised how many people, and there may be people in the audience, that still don't realize that you can use Flash to create applications for the iPad, for the iPhone, for mobile devices. So definitely check this site out if you're interested in gaming or you know people that are making decisions about technologies for games. So I want to talk really quick about HTML5, and I don't know if this saying, if you'll recognize this saying, but we have a saying in the States of like when you don't want to deal with something, you stick your head in the sand, right? And this is what I see a lot of Flash developers doing when it comes to HTML5. You know, I don't want to hear about it. I like to do Flash. Please go away. And that's not the right attitude to have because, like it or not, moving forward, if you're an interactive developer, somebody who builds interactive content for the web or for mobile, you're going to need to know HTML5 in addition to Flash because then you can actually make an educated decision about which is the right technology to use. You can't have an attitude of just like, HTML5 sucks, I just like Flash. Like, that's not going to fly. Your clients are not going to be happy if you have that type of attitude. So you need to know both. And, well, that's essentially what this slide is. Don't be stupid. You need to learn both. So this is a really important thing that we're trying to get across to people. And the reality is this. If you know Actionscript and you know Flash, HTML5 is so easy, it's ridiculous. It's the same stuff you've always been doing, except now you're doing it in JavaScript, which is very similar to Actionscript. You may remember like Actionscript 1 and 2, like it's almost kind of like going a little back in a time machine. But it's very easy to pick this stuff up. So I definitely recommend that you are familiar with both technologies. So with that being said, HTML5 is now capable of doing some amazing things directly in the browser. But for the area of games, Flash has always been the top technology for building games, and that is still true today. In fact, obviously, we still think it's going to be true 5 years from now as well. So, you know, why is Flash the best choice for games? So one of the biggest is consistency and reach. So like I said, if you have the latest version of Chrome, you can do incredible things in Canvas now, and it's really fast. Like the very latest modern browsers are extremely fast at this stuff. But the reality is there's a huge segment of the population out there that doesn't have those very new browsers. So HTML5 can be kind of inconsistent. And that's why there's a lot of really great demos out there of HTML5 games, but the clear choice, if you're looking to build the best possible game and reach the most possible people, is Flash. So we have some new numbers surrounding Flash Player reach. So about 4 weeks ago, we released Flash Player 11.2, and this contained a feature which is a silent auto update feature. And this is very similar to Google Chrome. So like, you know how one morning you wake up and Google Chrome is just different? Like it didn't ask you, do you want to update Chrome? It just does it in the background, and it doesn't let you know about it. So we rolled out that same feature in the Flash player. So since then, over 103 million people have actually opted in and said, yes, please update me in the background, because nobody likes to see those Flash player update things. So in just that short amount of time, 103 million people have said, yes, please do that. So what that means is we can update those millions of people to new versions of the Flash player in less than 24 hours. So it used to be that we would have to wait 6 months until, you know, people, like maybe like 80% of people had the player, and then it would kind of get slower. With this new feature in place, if we have a new version of the player, we can update everybody overnight to that new version of the player. So this is immensely important for, you know, increasing the speed in which new versions of the player get out there. So when we're looking at what are the biggest games on the web, we're of course talking about Facebook. So 9 of the top 10 Facebook games are built in Flash. In fact, the only one that isn't built in Flash, I think, is Words with Friends, which is a very simple word game. So I want to show you a couple of demos of stuff that's on Facebook right now. And can we get audio? Computer audio? Yeah. And just pretty cool. I don't know if you've seen this Google Doodle today. It's pretty cool. Yeah, that was it. Check it out later, you know. So one of the most successful games on iOS, so the iPad and iPhone, recently just went onto Facebook, and this is using Flash and Stage 3D. It's called Jetpack Joyride. And this is using a technology that we have called Alchemy. Let me turn it down a little bit. You may have played this game before on iOS. Anyway, it gets really intense once you start playing it. But so that's now on Facebook, and it was cross-compiled using Flash, actually. So that's an interesting one that just got released. Now, one that everybody's familiar with is Angry Birds. I'm sure everybody in here has played Angry Birds before. But this brings up a good point, because remember, Rovio made a Chrome version of Angry Birds that was built in WebGL and HTML5. So it was a demo, and it worked really well if you were in Chrome. It worked kind of okay if you were in other browsers didn't work at all. So when Rovio needed to have a technology for their actual game for Facebook, they chose Flash, obviously, because of the reach and the features that you have. So since I'm in Flash, I can go full screen and play this. You know, it's got really nice social integration. Let me just show you. Well, there's not a lot of new stuff here. Like, it's basically Angry Birds, the thing that you've played before. There's all these like power-up features that they've added specifically to Facebook. Yeah, so if you've played Facebook before, this isn't that exciting, but again, it's just to show you that they were able to get this technology onto Facebook and have the biggest possible reach because they were using Flash. I'll do one more. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm kind of over Angry Birds. Like, you know, I'm kind of bored with it personally, but it's still a good demo nonetheless. Well, one more. That's how I'm going to transition when I go in between. So when we're looking at what game companies are delivering their games with Flash, particularly when they're going to the web, it's all of the major game companies that you can think of. And what we're going to see, and I'll show you some demos later, of the new kind of console quality that you can get with Flash Player, which means these games that you typically would play on an Xbox or a PlayStation, you're going to be able to play those games now in the browser using Flash. So I did want to highlight this whole concept of, you know, Apple and Adobe. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but yes, there was like, oh, the argument about Flash Player in the browser on iOS devices. Like that's so 2 years ago now. Like that's over with. Now the thing that people don't realize is that you can use Flash to build games and applications for iOS, and not only can you do it, but Apple is completely fine with it. In fact, they love it, and they've been featuring games built in Flash on both the Mac App Store and the iOS App Store, and these games are really successful. So, so I just wanted to highlight that because, again, it's a misconception that you can't use Flash to target iOS devices. You can't in the browser, because there's no plugin in the browser, but you can for apps and games. And I want to show you one example of that. And this is a game that was recently featured in the Mac App Store. And this is created by Amanita Design. They're the ones who created Machinarium. So this is a game that they exported with Adobe Air, and they were able to sell that game in the Mac App Store. It's also available on Steam as well. So I'm just going to resume my game. And it's a really beautiful game, like amazing artwork and sound effects. In fact, this has won some awards for sound effects. Yeah, so the whole concept of this game is you have to walk around this tree, and basically you have to help save this tree. So I'm assuming I need to get that thing. So it's like a point-and-click adventure game. Really good to play if you're like on a plane. Or not on a plane, it doesn't matter. So you basically have to solve these puzzles. So definitely check that out. But this is a good example of a game that doesn't use any of the new game technology that we're creating. It doesn't use Stage 3D or anything. It's just like typical old Flash. A lot of this is built in Flash Professional on the timeline. And it's just hours of fun for you and your family. Is basically what I'm getting at. So definitely check that game out. But it's a good example of a game that Apple has featured and is really successful. Okay, so let's look at what are some of the new features that we're putting in the Flash Player to enable better games. So a couple of these features are specifically focused on the mouse. So we have two new features surrounding that. The first is mouse lock, and this is for first-person shooter 3D type games, and I'll show you what this is in a second. And then the other is right and middle click events for the mouse. So traditionally in Flash, we've only been able to listen to the left mouse button, like we could listen for a left click and the scroll wheel, but now we can listen to the entire mouse and have full control over it. So when we're talking about mouse lock, this is a thing that's very important for full screen 3D games. And I'll show you a quick demo of what that actually looks like. Let me go. So here I have this 3D thing. I'll go into full screen here. So right now in the Flash Player, so I have my mouse here. You can see that when my mouse cursor gets to either the bottom or to the top, I can't go any further, no matter how far I move my mouse. And the same thing when I go to the right. You can see as soon as my mouse cursor hits the right, I can't go any further. So this is going to be a problem in a game like Halo, where I'm using the mouse to look around, and there's some guy over here who's about to shoot me, and I go over here and I can't go anymore, and I have to keep picking up my mouse and trying to do weird things. So what I'm going to do is enable mouse lock now. And now you can see I can move my mouse all the way down the stage. Well, it got really rough right here. Well, no, the connection was lost. See that? If you had a better mouse than this crappy Apple Mighty Mouse thing. I don't like this mouse. Most of their products are good, but not this one. But anyway, you can see if my mouse hadn't gone out, I can just keep going forever and ever with my mouse, and it's gonna allow me to have completely free movement. Yeah, I think I just killed that mouse. Okay. There's an Apple Store right there, so it's perfect. Oh, now it's connected. So when we're talking about the right and middle mouse button, you can see we now have mouse events that are essentially just like the regular click, mouse down, mouse up, but they're for the right mouse button and for the middle mouse button. So we have full control over all of the aspects of the mouse. Now, any of you out there who've done Flash work, you know typically what happens when you right-click on a Flash movie, you see this menu. So that's still true today, but in Flash Player 11.2, if you listen for the right-click, any type of right-click mouse event, it will immediately get rid of that menu forever. You see that? It's not, yeah, that was dramatic, but I wanted to highlight it. And I'll show you a quick example of what you can do with that. So this is a little demo that I made, and now, see, this is what's so funny about the internet. So I'm sitting in my hotel room going, I want to make a demo about like changing something like with a custom right menu. So I just happen to find these funny icons of political leaders. But like so many people now are like, oh, why'd you get so political on me? Like, I didn't know you were so political. I'm like, it's just I found these icons and I'm using them. So there's no like hidden message here. Anyway, so what I'm listening for is a right-click event on the stage. So you can see I'm not getting any right-click menu when I right-click. But I've set up a custom context menu here. So when I right-click, I can change to a different leader, right? So this is now enabling me to have a customized context menu that's appropriate for my application, which is really important for games, also really important for enterprise applications. Let's say you have a flex data grid and you want to right-click on a certain cell and like have a custom menu to allow you to do stuff. Really important. And then for games, it could be you shoot a different type of bullet with the right mouse button, a different one with the left mouse button. So really important feature. Let's see it one more time. Yeah, and that was my slide telling me to go do that demo. A little unnecessary now. Another one that people have been, as long as I've been working in Flash, people have wanted multi-threading in the Flash player because we all know that you only have one thread to work with in the player. So let's say you have some animation happening, and then you want to do this like crazy Actionscript calculation. Well, you're on the same thread as the UI, so your UI is either going to freeze up or it's going to be really jittery. So we have multi-threading coming to the player. And let me show you that demo. Not that one again. So in this demo, we have a really simple, we have a square that's animating around in a circle. So when I click this button, it's going to go off and do this like million-line for loop, like this really intensive ActionScript operation, and then return a bitmap to this. So you can see when I do it using today's Flash player, my UI is completely locked up while that is happening. So I have to wait until that operation is finished, and then it comes back, and now the UI can start operating again. But using ActionScript workers, which is the API that we're creating, you can see when I click it now, I can fully interact with the UI. It doesn't affect the animation, and then it comes back and delivers the result to me. It's because I was able to do that calculation on a separate thread. So, and this will be here in not Flash Player 11.3, but the one after that, which we'll have available like on labs. Hopefully fairly soon. Well, yeah, I actually don't know when, but I think it's going to be, one of the things that now that we're focusing our efforts for Flash Player, like, we're not really doing so much around Flex anymore, and some of these other areas. So now we can release stuff a lot faster, and a lot of these features that people have been asking for a long time, we can finally get in there and do, which is nice. All right, I want to talk quickly about Flash Professional CS6. And I'm only going to do it quickly because Paul Tranny is going to be up here a little later in the afternoon, who's going to go into it a little bit more. But I want to highlight a couple of the features that are nice to have. So the first four, if you're doing game development, you're probably familiar with what Sprite Sheets are. It's essentially taking an animation, taking each frame of the animation, packing it together onto a single bitmap, and then at runtime, you can use that to drive your animations in your games. And it's a really fast way to do it, especially when we're talking about going to mobile devices. So you now have the ability to generate these directly inside of Flash. And we'll look at that in a second. The other is to address the whole HTML5 thing, because when we go around and talk to customers, a lot of clients are saying, I have to have this animation and I want it to run in the iPad in the browser, right? So Flash doesn't run there. But what these animators want to do is they still want to use Flash to do their animations, because what other tool really is there? So this new feature allows you to export Flash animations to HTML5. And let me quickly show you what that workflow looks like. And there's the new splash screen, if you haven't seen it before. It couldn't be contained, so it's breaking out of the square. It's just, yeah, something. I'm sure there was some meeting where the artist said that. It's like So I'm going to open this FLA, and this just has an animation created by Chris Georginas, who's a really good Flash character animator. And if I go into this movie clip, you can see it's just a big vector timeline animation. So let's say I wanted to use this for a sprite sheet. So I could come down and see it in the library here. So here's that animated clip. I can just right-click in the library and say Generate Sprite Sheet. And this is, again, going to go through that animation, extract all the individual frames, and pack them together here on this image. And I can preview what the animation is going to look actually running from the sprite sheet. And I can essentially export this now. Now, the data formats that we support for this range from just regular JSON to native iOS game frameworks to Starling to Cocos 2D. And you can add your own data formats in here as well. So that's how I export a sprite sheet from the library, but I can also do it from the stage. So if I just, let's say I want to transform this clip a little bit, let's say shrink it and maybe add filters or something, I can then right-click on it on the stage and say Generate Sprite Sheet. And it's going to export the sprite sheet, but it's going to keep all of those transformations that I did. And we can see what that's going to look like now as it's transformed. So now let's say that this is an animation and a client says it has to be in HTML5. We want it in HTML5. It's got to be in the iPad on the browser. So we have this extension called the Toolkit for Create.js. And Create.js is a bunch of JavaScript libraries created by Grant Skinner, which makes it really easy for you to do HTML5 if you're coming from Flash. The APIs are very similar to the way Flash's APIs are. So all I'm going to do is to click this Publish button. And now that animation that was in Flash is now running inside of HTML5 Canvas. So I can actually right-click, and we can go into the developer tools, and you can see what it looks like. So there's a single canvas in my HTML. If I go to the head tag, we can see those JavaScript libraries. And here's the file that was actually generated for me. And if I scroll down, you see all these graphics calls. What the extension has done is it's gone through the timeline and looked at all the vector art and converted that into HTML5 canvas drawing calls. So this is essentially it's not, you can use a sprite sheet if you want, but this will result in a smaller file size because, again, you're not dealing with bitmaps, you're dealing with vectors here. So now I can go beyond that. You can actually write some JavaScript directly inside of Flash Pro. Now, this is just for prototyping. Flash is not going to become like a full JavaScript editor. So let me just copy the snippet here. And I'm just going to go, so this clip right here is an instance name of dog. And I'm going to go into the Actions panel, just go to that first keyframe. And this is a little block of JavaScript. So essentially, if you're familiar with an on-enter frame event in Flash, well, the create.js library has what's called a ticker, which is a similar type of thing. So I'm basically saying ticker, add listener, and I'm going to listen for that tick event on that dog movie clip, which is on the stage. And then all I'm doing in the tick function is just doing standard Flash easing code for animating something to a mouse position. So this is very similar to what you would do in Flash. Now, the way in which I tell Flash that this is JavaScript is to wrap it in a comment block with JS after it right here. So it's a little weird, right? But again, this is for simple prototyping. But let's say I wanted to make a banner ad, which doesn't really have necessarily a lot of code in it. Let's say at the end, you can just listen for a click and go to some URL. I could use this. So what I'm going to do is to publish this again. Let me refresh. And now you can see that animation is running, but it's following and easing to my mouse position. So now this is using the latest version of Chrome. So the performance of this is amazing. It's 60 frames per second, perfectly smooth. But what's also good is, like on the iPad and on the iPhone, HTML5 Canvas is now hardware accelerated. So this will run really well also, on mobile devices in the browser. So this is a really exciting thing because you can keep doing your same workflow, your same animation techniques, and be able to target HTML5 Canvas. Okay, so the two latest Flash runtimes we have, and these are available on Adobe Labs, so these are still in beta versions, but they're Flash Player 11.3 and Adobe Air 3.3. So in Flash Player 11.3, some of the features that are in there, we can finally now, when you're in full screen mode in the browser, accept full keyboard input. So this is really important for games, full screen games, where you need to chat with other people in the game. You couldn't do that previously in Flash because we didn't allow you to access all the keys. So that background silent auto update feature that I mentioned before was just for Windows for 11.2, but now that feature is rolling out for Mac in 11.3. A couple of new features for audio, which really reduce the latency, which just makes the sound class in general a lot more performant. Stage 3D progressive texture streaming. One of the nice things is now the bitmap data class actually has an encode method on it natively, which you can encode bitmap data to PNGs or JPEGs without using some third-party ActionScript library. Bitmap data draw with quality. This is an important one because you can set the stage quality of your game to low, which will greatly improve performance. And you can say on a specific bitmap, render this one at high quality, render this one at 50%. So you can have fine-tuned control over how each of your bitmaps is rendered, so you can speed up performance. Frame label events, finally, if you do a lot of timeline stuff in Flash. Adobe Air 3.3, you get all of what I just mentioned in Flash Player 11.3. We can now debug iOS applications over USB, which is a nice thing. You can test your iOS applications in the native iOS simulator that comes with Xcode, which is really important to be able to do that. Enhanced background support for iOS, so you can do more things when your application is actually in the background and not in focus. Android 4 stylus support. So as more Android devices come out with styluses, we have an API there to be able to interact with that. Mac App Store compatibility. So if you're building an Air application, we will make sure your application is conforming to what Apple says it has to in order to sell it on the Mac App Store. So upcoming Flash players, these are the next versions. So the next version is codenamed Dolores, and this is where we'll introduce that multi-threading feature that I talked about, the ActionScript Worker API. Support for advanced profiling using a new tool called Monocle, which is this amazing new tool that allows you to debug and profile your Flash content using the release version of the Flash player. And that's going to be a huge thing for games. Support for more hardware accelerated video cards. Improving Actionscript performance when targeting iOS, so improving our compiler that cross-compiles to iOS. Performance Index API. This allows you at runtime to get a score for how fast the user's computer is, like their graphics performance. So you can make a decision like, if the user only has a 5, I'm only going to show them half as many particles as I would to somebody who has a score of 10. Release outside mouse event API. It was in AS2, never made it to AS3. We joked that it was lost in the Adobe office somewhere. So we found it, huddling in the corner, and we're putting it back. Flash Player Next doesn't even have a code name yet, but it's the one after Dolores. So this is where we're going to really refactor and modernize the code of the Flash player. It's got a lot of old code in it that needs to be kind of stripped out. And here we're going to be creating a new Actionscript virtual machine, which is going to amazingly speed up the performance of Actionscript. And along with that, there's going to be some fairly significant updates to the Actionscript language itself. People have been asking for a lot of features for a while in Actionscript, so we'll start to address these. Here are a few things that we're looking at doing to help performance of Actionscript. Stringent static typing as a default. More numeric types. So right now we have uint, int, and number, but this would include things like float for, double, more of these numeric types that you need when you're targeting GPUs. And type inference for the compiler. All right, so now I want to talk about Stage 3D because it's the biggest new feature in Flash in I don't know how long, because it's completely revolutionized how fast your applications can run. Because we're now able to fully target the GPU on your computer and on your mobile devices. Typically everything in Flash had been software rendered, which is really slow. It really taxes the CPU. And now with Stage 3D, again, you can fully target the GPU. Now I say it's possibly the worst name ever for a technology because people think it's just for 3D content, and it's not. It's just as important for 2D games as it is for 3D games. But when people hear the name Stage 3D, they think, well, I'm not doing 3D, so I don't need to use it, which is not the case. So one thing surrounding Stage 3D is Adobe recently announced that we're partnering with Unity. And Unity, if you don't know, creates arguably the best 3D gaming tool out there. It's just an awesome tool for building 3D games. Adobe is not planning on making a 3D gaming tool. As far as I know, that's not something that we're looking at doing because we don't have the expertise in that. So it's better to partner with the best tool out there in order to do that. So Unity has developed a Flash export feature from their tool, and this is, you build your Unity game in the same way that you've always done it, but now at the end you have this option to export and compile to the Flash player. And I want to show you a quick demo of what that looks like. So when you download the Unity tool, it comes with a sample game, like an open source sample game, called Angry Bots. And this is what that game looks like, and this has been exported now to Flash in Stage 3D. So you can see when I right-click, there's that menu. And you can see the amazing quality that you get with this. Because again, this is the type of game that you would be used to playing on your game consoles. So the thought is that you're going to be able to play these types of games directly inside of Facebook. So you're going to be able to be in there with all your friends and shoot all your friends, which I'm sure a lot of us we've wanted to do that on occasion. I love that thing. So again, that's a really important thing because we don't have an offering for a 3D gaming tool. So it's good that you have the option now to export from Unity. So another side of that is Epic. So Epic, one of the biggest game companies out there, they have a game tool and framework called the UDK. And they've been doing some work with Stage 3D, nothing that's actually public yet. But I did want to highlight that you can actually go to this now directly in the browser. So if you go to unrealengine.com/flash, you can actually look at this demo now directly in your own browsers. So let me, yeah, there's a lot of assets to download here, so I'm not really going to wait for it. But definitely check this out, because this runs really, really well, and you don't have to have like a gaming, like a souped-up gaming laptop in order to run it. Like, this is just a regular MacBook Pro. Well, now I kind of want to wait for it now, but it's teasing me. Well, I'll take a drink of water. It should be coming up. There it goes. So this is not video that you're seeing right now. This is live 3D, which is being rendered. And this is their Epic Citadel demo. Let me actually, let me just walk around here a little bit. But you can see the amazing quality. This is something that I'd be playing on my Xbox or something. And we're now going to be able to play these games directly in the Flash player. And yeah, it's cool. It's a cool thing. So definitely check it out in the browser, because again, I want you to test it on your own machine, so you know that I don't have some like NSA computer up here. So when you want to build Stage 3D content, you have two options available to you. You can either do low-level Stage 3D programming, and this is very similar to OpenGL or DirectX, which is really kind of, you know, unless you have a background in that, you might not necessarily want to do that. It's really low-level, and it's really kind of challenging. If you're like a typical Flash developer, you can use a higher-level Actionscript framework. And a good example is Angry Birds. Use the Starling framework, which I'll talk about in a second. So when we're looking at, say you want to build a 3D game or application, there's a whole bunch of 3D frameworks available. This is just a small list of some of the most popular. Away 3D, Alternativa, Flare 3D, Minko. And you know, these all have pluses and minuses. You know, you need to look at all of them and decide which framework is the best for whatever you're doing. But what about 2D? Because again, arguably the most successful games in the world right now are not these 3D games where you're, you know, shooting things. It's the simple 2D casual games which are really successful. And these are, you know, Cut the Rope, Compte de Jour, you know, Angry Birds, Tiny Wings, these types of 2D casual games. These are the types of games that everybody's playing on Facebook. It's the type of games everybody's playing on their iPad, Android phones, all of that type of stuff. So we needed a way to make it easy for you to be able to target Stage 3D when you're building 2D content. So what we did was to fund this open source project called Starling. And it's a framework that allows you to easily tap into the Stage 3D APIs when you're building 2D content. And this is the same framework that Angry Birds used to deliver their game for Facebook. So this is a code snippet from Starling. So I'm creating a sprite, setting its X and Y, listening for an enter frame event, and then adding it to the display list. So you'll notice that this is regular Flash Actionscript display list type code. The only difference is if I went to the top of this page where the imports were, I'd be using starling.display.sprite instead of flash.display.sprite. So essentially, it's the same, a lot of the same class names, the same types of code, which makes Starling really easy to use if you already know Flash. So there's a great free book available from O'Reilly, and it's just available online, but it's called Introducing Starling. If you just search for that in Google, you'll be directed to the PDF. But if you want to get into it, definitely check that out. Again, it's totally free. So stage 3 on mobile, because we've been talking about stage 3 for a long time, but the big question that we always get was, when can I use it on mobile devices? You can now do that since Air 3.2. And I want to show you some demos now of how it runs, because it runs extremely well. So I'm going to walk over here to the switcher. So I want to show you some demos of Flash running on the iPad here. Now the first thing that I'm going to show is something that's not a game at all, because again, the Air technology, which allows you to run things on iOS and mobile devices, is not just for games. It's where we're seeing a lot of people using it. But this is an application that was built for National Geographic. They were doing a TV series about the Titanic, and this was all built in Flash. And I have this timeline at the bottom, which I can scrub through, which actually shows me the entire building of the Titanic, like over time. So I can scrub back and forth on here. And then I can go to, let's say, a certain point here, and I can look at like photos and videos of, how things were built at this particular stage of the thing. And this was something that was featured by Apple in the App Store. It was one of the new and noteworthy applications, just built with even with the new Flash technology that I've been talking about. It's just a really nice example, and it's nice because they focused on the positive aspect of the Titanic, which was the building of the Titanic. Because usually they talk, everything is focused on the end result, which is not so positive. So this next game I want to show you is, hold on, pulled out. So this is a game that we've actually, it's called Waste Invaders, created by Waste Creative. And we're enabled to get this open sourced. So if you go to that gaming.adobe.com website, you can download the full source for this game. And this is a top-down shooter game. I'll just play it for a second. This is using like the Stage 3D APIs for a 2D game. But you can see the performance of this is amazing. 60 frames per second, native performance that you're able to get with this. Yeah, so it's a really cool game. And again, you can get the source code for this if you want to see how this was put together. So what happened is then some developers in China said, that's a good demo, it's pretty good, but we have something better. It's a similar type of game called Bullet Sky. And I'll show you a couple of levels of this. So we can see, again, it's this top-down shooter concept where I have to, I'm supposed to kill this guy, and then other enemies start coming out. And this is one of the slower levels in the game. So what I always show is level 5, which is really funny. Because it's just insane. Like what is the strategy involved if I'm always shooting in every direction on every single second? I should just be able to sit there and win. So the next thing I wanted to show you is surrounding native extensions, and this is the Air runtime gives you access to a lot of nice features, but you can use a native extension to get you access to even more device-specific features. So this is a game called Geometry Arena. It's just like a retro kind of shooter game, but it incorporates the native Game Center on iOS using a native extension. So let me just play this for a second. It's actually a really difficult game once it starts getting going. I'm going to die just on purpose. So, so now if I go to the high score, you can see that this is using the native Game Center support on iOS to do high scores and leaderboards. So I don't have to make my own like weird little Flash leaderboard system that's like hosted on my website that has like 3 people in it. Like, you know, I can use the real leaderboards that are on iOS, and the same thing, you know, you can do the same thing for like OpenFaint or any of these other types of things. So that's cool. And then, oh, you know what? I don't have. Let me connect to Wi-Fi really quickly. Just talk amongst yourselves, you know. All right, so I want to show you an example of something, again, that's, yeah, I don't want those invitations, sorry. Something that's using Stage 3D, but for something that's not a game at all. And this is an application called Apex VJ. And this is an application that allows you to search and browse SoundCloud, which is a really popular kind of online music sharing thing. And hopefully I have internet. Yeah, I do. So again, it allows you to search SoundCloud, and this is using regular Flash right here, like these menus. This isn't Stage 3D. But let me go to one of these songs here. Now, all of these music visualizations that are happening, like reacting to the music, all of this is done in Stage 3D. And I can go to like different visualizations here. And this, all of this, again, it's reacting to the music. So let me... or like here's a kind of a cool one. And you can actually buy these visualizations directly from within the app. Let me go to a couple of the other ones. And you can see just the awesome performance that you get because, again, this is running all in the GPU using those Stage 3D APIs. Yeah. So it's a really cool mix of regular Flash with Stage 3D content. So this is an app that you can get right now on the iTunes App Store. Again, it's called Apex VJ. Let me show you just one last one, because you know when we're up here showing games, you know it's always explosions and violence, and you know you heard the electronic music. It's like, oh, it's so negative, but when you know, it's all about the children. I think isn't that what we say all the time, Serge? Right? Like in the end, it's when a child plays with your application and the smile on their face. That's what it's about. So this game called Winter on Whale Island, which you can get in the App Store. I can wipe away the fog on the screen and change the language. And this is using Stage 3D and the Starling framework, but it's for a very like simple children's type game. So again, there's no violence involved. It's just you and this little pig. So like I can take the sun and I have to use like multi-touch to make the sun bigger. I have to take my 2 fingers and like combine all these clouds together. You know, so he's your little friend down there, you know, and he's the one that you're helping throughout the game. And once I get enough of these clouds together, it will start snowing a little bit. Let me do one more. See, it starts snowing, like maybe he's never seen snow before, like he's happy. And if I move the sun away, now it turns to nighttime, but oh no, he's cold. So you can use your finger, just give him a little bit of attention. And now he's happy again. Anyway, it's just like a great kids game that doesn't, it uses Stage 3D in these advanced things, but for something that's just, well, it's adorable, right? Yeah, so, I mean, that's not a really good segue for the end, but that's it. That's all I had to show. So thank you.